This is FBI Breaking News.
Firstly, the regulations are quite superfluous and unnecessary. The Disaster Management Act covers what this amendment to the regulations seeks to give to the government. They already have it under the Disaster Management Act, which we've been under a state of disaster. In 3 days' time, it would have been 2 years. So the government is already well aware of the Disaster Management Act and the type of powers they have. So we really don't need this. The government already has it. And from a broader view, I would say, as the second point, is that this, on face value, looks like an overt power grab by the government. If one just looks through it, the type of powers that are being given to the government, the type of things they can do with citizens, the way they can override certain rights, it's quite alarming. Third, I would say that there is a bevy of violation of fundamental rights, dignity, freedom of the person, freedom of association. And I think for every citizen listening to this or reading through this, it should be quite alarming what the government's seeking to push through these regulations. For the salient terms of the agreement of the regulations are extremely vague, and the sort of ambiguity leaves the regulations open to abuse. The government, at the end of the day, can just give an interpretation to it that's most favorable to them, stretching it as far as they want. So words like suspected or in contact are left open. We don't know what it means. I mean, to what degree must somebody be in contact with somebody who's infected, or what kind of suspicion is warranted? The other thing is we don't have the attached caveat of reasonable. So reasonable suspicion or reasonably in contact with, which just leaves it possibly open to being unreasonable. But nevertheless, 5, the government reserves itself the right to force citizens not only to take whatever pharmaceutical drugs that they deem necessary, but also to detain them in an isolation facility. We don't know exactly what that is, where it's going to be, but essentially the government will, under these regulations, if passed, have the right to just take people and force them into isolation facilities and quarantine them. 6, while these regulations make provision for home isolation, it does do that, but it makes the requirements for home isolation extremely onerous, and it's going to be extremely difficult to implement for most people. So, for example, if someone's infected with a disease listed in the schedule, they must isolate in a well-ventilated room, or in a residence not shared with any other person who is not being quarantined. So if you have a 1-bedroom apartment or house, you're in a really difficult position. Either the sick person or the healthy person is going to have to leave, but somebody must get out of there. And so this again just forces people to end up at these quarantine or isolation facilities, whether they want to be there or not. 7, it compels citizens to be fully vaccinated or provide a negative PCR test within 72 hours of wishing to leave the country. This is, of course, just on face value a violation of freedom of movement. It's unclear also how the state seeks to enforce this when the definition of what it means to be fully vaccinated means. It changes. The more boosters come out, the more the definition changes. So we don't know really where this is going to end. 8, the state seems to have imposed these enforcements in open-ended ways. So, for example, if one looks at Regulation 15A, it talks about someone who's been suspected of having a disease or being in contact with someone having the disease. They may not refuse to submit to medical examination, be admitted to isolation facilities, or submit to mandatory treatment, but it doesn't say where that ends. So we don't see that they need to submit to this until such time as they are no longer contagious, or we don't find any traces of the disease in their blood. It's just an open-ended thing. It starts at one point, the government can take you, put you in a facility, and we don't know where that ends. So that's troubling. The state seeks to circumvent 9 privacy laws. For the sake of emergency, they can trace citizens, they can follow them wherever they're going. Presumably, they're probably going to try and tap into their media, social media, trace them through maybe cell phone towers. It happened with Eureka, and we know that was declared unconstitutional, but it's a similar thing. So circumventing privacy laws in order for the sake of what the government deems to be an emergency allows them then to do this. And 10, lastly, these regulations overarchingly treat sick people worse than they treat criminals. So just like a criminal under the National Health Act, the state will be allowed to detain you. But unlike in criminal law, when a policeman tries to arrest a criminal, he has to have probable cause. He needs a reason why he's detaining this person, because this person has fundamental rights. But in this case, a mere suspicion that you are infected with a disease and the state can basically just take you off the street and lock you in a facility. Cop walks past you, you cough, he suspects that you have some sort of disease that's maybe an epidemic or pandemic at the time, and they can lock you up and ship you off to an isolation facility. So that's the 10 most concerning points.
Yeah, and I think it's very concerning to everybody listening to this program, because it's horrific what you just outlining there, Jared, that the fundamental human rights of people and their freedoms are going to be seriously limited, even suspended under this new amendment to the National Health Act. And so that's why we encouraging and urging everybody out there, if you're watching this program, to go to SA Public Speaks. We've created a portal to make it easy for you to comment on this bill, on this amendment. So government is inviting comment until the 15th of April 2022. And we need everybody to speak, to say why you don't agree with this amendment. And on the site, on the SA Public Speaks site, there's information guiding you, giving you a little bit of background so that you'll have some kind of information when you make the comments, but you've got to do it in your own words and put your name and telephone number there, so that we try to get as hundreds of thousands of citizens to speak into this, because it is so troubling. It is so dangerous. So make sure that you go to the SA Public Speak site or the Family Policy Institute website. It's there as well. Click on the link and fill in your comments and send it. Once you submit it, it goes directly to the Department of Health.